You never lied to her, not once. You just never corrected her. 8 months before the wire hit, back when the deal was still a rumor, your wife guessed a number out loud, $2 million. She said it the way you'd guess a stranger's age, casually, not expecting to be right. It sounded to her like the kind of number that changes a life. You didn't correct it, you let her keep it, and you've let her keep it through 11 dinners with her parents, 3 calls with a financial advisor she found on her own, and 1 Saturday spent touring a slightly nicer house 40 minutes outside the city that you both agreed was a stretch. It was not a stretch. The real number was $14.2 million. Her number was 0.9% of that. This isn't a story about lying to your spouse. It's a story about what happens in the gap between a number and a feeling, and how long a person can live inside that gap before it costs them something they never budgeted for. 14 months earlier, a conference room that smells like burnt coffee. Across the table, a man named Whitfield runs corporate development for a company 3 times your size. You built your business over 9 years. Logistics software, 41 employees, a client list that reads like a phone book of regional trucking companies. Whitfield opens at $9 million. Your lawyer, Odalise, has done 6 deals like this and treats each one like chess against an opponent who doesn't know he's playing. She tells you to say nothing for 4 seconds after his offer. You say nothing for 4 seconds. It does more work than anything you could have said. 6 weeks later, the number is $14.2 million, $10.6 million at close, $2.1 million in escrow, $1.5 million in an earnout. Odalise tells you, flatly, to plan around never seeing. Nobody at home knows any of this is happening. Your wife, Priyanka, knows you've been in talks the way you're always in talks. You've mentioned acquisition interest twice before, and both times it evaporated after a few meetings and an NDA that quietly expired. She stopped asking follow-up questions the way you stop asking a friend about the screenplay he's been writing for 6 years. Not because she doesn't care, because caring out loud about something that keeps not happening gets exhausting. The day it closes, you're in a different city, signing a document 91 pages long. You skim most of it. Odalise already told you the 4 paragraphs that matter. The wire confirmation lands at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. You read the number twice. You close the laptop. You eat a sandwich standing up on a curb because there's no table free, while a man behind you argues with someone on the phone about a parking ticket. None of that has anything to do with you anymore, except that you just became worth more, in one afternoon, than both your parents made across their entire working lives combined, twice over. And you're eating a sandwich on a curb because you didn't want to wait for a table. You call Priyanka on the drive to the airport. She's thrilled, genuinely, the way people are thrilled for someone they love, before a number attaches itself to the feeling. She asks how much. A couple million, you say. It's complicated with the escrow stuff. True, word for word. Misleading in total. She says maybe you can finally redo the kitchen. You say maybe. 40 minutes into being worth 11 times what she believes. The biggest financial conversation in your marriage is about countertops. That first week, you're not thinking about the kitchen. You're thinking about a call already scheduled with a wealth manager named Castellanos, recommended by Odalise 11 months earlier, when the deal was still theoretical, because she said, you don't want to be shopping for someone the week the money shows up. You want that relationship already boring by the time it lands. Castellanos' practice technically requires $10 million in investable assets to get a seat at the table. You didn't mention that number to anyone. Saying it out loud would mean explaining the number underneath it. Castellanos opens a laptop and turns the screen toward you. 4 columns. Cash you can touch in a crisis. Cash that's working but slow. Cash locked for tax reasons. And a 4th column, smaller, labeled in his own shorthand. The number that doesn't exist yet. The escrow, not real until it's real. He recommends the bulk move into a revocable trust. A donor-advised fund, seated at $400,000, for tax efficiency you didn't ask for. And a personal checking account, the one Priyanka will actually see, fed by a fixed transfer of $18,000 a month. Not because that's what you need. Because it's the number Castellanos calculated as invisible, enough that nothing looks like it changed, small enough that she'd never think to ask where the rest went, because as far as she knows, there is no rest. She sees a steady paycheck-shaped deposit from a business that just sold. She has no reason to go looking for an account that was never mentioned to her, holding money she doesn't know exists. You didn't choose the $18,000. You didn't choose the trust's name either. A string of words picked the way it's always picked, so it won't Google, won't connect to your name, won't surface if someone types it into a search bar at midnight. Priyanka's name is on the checking account. It's on nothing else. Not from exclusion, exactly, More a kind of momentum that started the day you didn't correct her guess and never found a natural place to stop. The test comes 8 months in, and it doesn't come from her. It comes from Brackett, your old co-founder, who left 4 years before the sale after an equity dispute you both agreed, at the time, to never discuss again. Brackett sees the acquisition in a trade publication. The real figure isn't public. The article guesses low, an undisclosed sum believed to be in the single-digit millions. Brackett doesn't believe the guess. He calls a lawyer. The letter claims his unvested stake entitles him to a cut of proceeds from any liquidity event. Odalise reads it once and says the word that ends most letters like this: no. But for 6 weeks, deposition is a real possibility. Discovery. A judge somewhere asking to see bank statements. For 6 weeks you don't sleep past 5 a.m. You lie there running the same scene, a courtroom, a lawyer reading your actual net worth into the record, and Priyanka in the gallery hearing it for the first time from a stranger's mouth instead of yours. You snap at your daughter over a spilled cup of juice on a Tuesday that has nothing to do with juice, and you know it while you're doing it, and you do it anyway. The case settles for $340,000, paid quietly from the trust, sealed under a mutual release neither of you can discuss. It's a strange kind of relief. The one moment your real number came closest to surfacing at your own kitchen table ends in a document that legally forbids anyone from ever bringing it up again. You tell Priyanka you had some old business stuff with Brackett that finally got resolved. She nods the way she nods at most things involving your old company, a place she visited maybe 4 times in 9 years, mostly remembered for the good coffee machine. The strange part isn't the hiding, it's how normal everything still looks. You drive the same Honda CR-V from 2021, now at 61,000 miles, check engine light still on. You pack lunch 3 days a week, a habit Priyanka started back when saving actually mattered, that neither of you ever formally decided to stop. You redid the kitchen, $61,000, which felt, when you approved it, like an enormous number, a real splurge you talked about for weeks. It is, in the actual math of your life now, 0.4% of what you're worth. You watched Priyanka agonize over quartz versus quartzite for 40 minutes, genuinely torn over an $1,800 difference, and it took everything in you not to say the sentence sitting behind your teeth. It doesn't matter, none of it matters the way it used to. Pick whichever one you like. You didn't say it. You let her agonize, partly because saying it honestly would open a much bigger conversation you weren't ready for. Partly, if you're honest, because there was something almost peaceful about watching a decision get made the old way, by 2 people who still needed to care about $1,800, even if only one of them still did. Your best friend Dorsey sold his marketing agency around the same time, for a number he told everyone within 6 days. New truck. A boat he uses maybe 6 times a year. At a mutual friend's birthday dinner, he spends 20 minutes describing an angel investment, getting in early on the ground floor, while 3 people do the specific, practiced nodding of people who suspect they're about to be asked for money. Someone asks how your sale went. It went well, you say. Glad it's behind us. The conversation moves on in 9 seconds. Nothing in your tone or your car in the parking lot invites a follow-up. Dorsey gets asked for money twice that month. You don't get asked once. You go home and tell Priyanka the dinner was fine, that Dorsey seemed to be having a great year. She agrees. From where she's sitting, that's simply true. The real conversation almost happens 11 months in, on an ordinary Tuesday, while Priyanka works through the family's taxes with a new accountant, one Castellanos quietly recommended, without either of them realizing they were now working from 2 different versions of your finances. She calls from the next room, holding a 1099, her voice puzzled. Why does this say we made way more in dividend income than I thought we had invested? This is the fork. The one you've technically known was coming since the phone call from the car. You stand in the doorway for a second longer than the moment requires. You could tell her right now, the whole architecture, the trust, the $18,000, the number underneath the number. Instead, you say the accountant probably has an old spreadsheet, that you'll call and sort it out. And you do call, later that night, after she's asleep, sitting in the car in the driveway instead of the kitchen, phone light the only light on your face, not to fix an error, but to ask the accountant to route future statements through you first. He doesn't ask why. Men in his position rarely do. Sure, he says, I'll flag your file. 11 seconds. The fork closes for another year. You tell yourself this is temporary, that you're waiting for a calmer week, a vacation, some evening without the kids needing something. You've told yourself that for almost a year now. You're starting to suspect there is no calmer week coming, that the obstacle was never timing. It's that once you tell her the real number, the marriage you've been having, The one where a kitchen renovation is a genuine, nervous, shared decision between two people figuring it out together, ends, and a different one begins. One where nothing ever again gets decided the way $1,800 used to matter. The escrow releases in full at month 14, $2.1 million landing in the trust with no ceremony, one line from Castellanos confirming receipt. The earnout comes in at $600,000 instead of $1.5 million. Retention missed its target by 6 points. A detail that lives in a spreadsheet you'll glance at once and mention to no one. The total, once every contingency clears, settles at $13.7 million. Priyanka still believes the sale was somewhere around $2 million, maybe a little more with the escrow she vaguely remembers you mentioning. She is, in every real sense, living the correct life for the number she believes. Careful with the courts, proud of the kitchen, still packing lunches on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You are living inside a number nobody around you can see, checking a trust balance from your phone in the driveway before you go inside. Engine off, check engine light still on. Thinking that you built an entire architecture to protect this family from risk. And somewhere along the way, it started protecting something else instead. The version of your marriage that existed before the wire hit. The one you're not sure survives the truth. The one you still haven't found the nerve to find out.